Well, joining me in the studio today and for the rest of the show, I'm very pleased to say, is author Angelica Malin. Angelica, this is a hugely controversial proposal, policy now of the government, and there's been quite a reaction to it. What is your take on it?
Yeah, there has been quite the backlash with saying that it's inhumane. One thing I think that's interesting to note with this is I feel like after Partygate there needed to be a kind of big splash, something that could go on all the headlines and the front covers of papers, and that's very much worked in this case because it does feel like people are not talking about the birthday cake anymore. Sure. And they're talking about this story. Not that this story isn't important, but I do think that's something to note. Could this be a kind of a political move here to distract from that story? We've seen in Australia that that they've tried similar schemes at a huge cost with not that much success. So it's interesting that this is something that the government is choosing to do. I think the scale of it perhaps has been overblown. We've heard from quite a lot of experts saying that it doesn't seem like it's going to be in the thousands of people that will be piloting in this scheme, and the numbers will probably be a lot longer. But the process isn't really changing. It's just outsourcing it to another place, which we've seen in other countries doesn't really work.
Well, that's a very interesting point you make, because we heard earlier on in the news that it was, in Australia they're talking about hundreds of people for a huge amount of money. But is that the case, that it's hundreds of people because it has acted as a deterrent, and actually there aren't as many people trying to get into Australia during that period of time? I think it was 2001 they started their offshore policy, and then they said they saw a drop in the number of people trying to get into Australia. And isn't this what the PM is trying to do? He's trying to deter people from making that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's trying to deter people from making that journey in the first place. Whether or not that will actually work, I'm not so sure that it actually will, and it's kind of it's increasing the danger involved with it. Actually, it's a really worrying thing overall. So I think there's two things I think need to happen. One is investing more in humanitarian and development aid to the countries that people are fleeing from in the first place, and then looking at the processes with the channel. So at the end of last year, 100,000 people were still waiting to hear about their asylum status, like 62,000 of which have been waiting for more than 6 months. So that process is also super slow. So looking at those two things as well.
And you're right to point out how slow the process is, because